So whoever's still watching these tutorial series on the Pokeball, we're going to do one final thing just to give it that extra little touch. And then I'll kind of close this up. Okay, so what I want to do is add some post-processing stuff, so a little bit of compositing. I'm not sure what I'm going to composite into it, but just maybe sharpen it up, add some extra color, stuff like that. Okay, so we want to actually split the screen here, and what we want to do is go up to the corner until you see the crosshairs, and you want to drag out. So split it up about half, and now what we want to do, we can also go to the default setup, or not the default setup, but the compositing setup, but really let's just work with this for now. So we can go down to this box here, and we want to pick the editor type, and we want to pick the nodes editor, so nodes editor. And we want to go to, we can actually size this up a little bit more, because we don't really need the 3D view right now. Okay, so we want to pick the compositing nodes, and we want to, so it's this little icon right here. And then you want to choose use nodes, and you want to actually choose backdrop. Now I know it doesn't look like there's anything here, and we actually have to select our scene that we rendered, so you can go to this little box and then select scene, and we'll have our latest render right there, our latest rendered image. And we want to add another node. You can also press Shift A, just like adding, and we want to add a output, and we want to add a viewer. So output viewer, and we can just drag that over here. Okay, so what we want to actually do is drag this well, actually we can just drag this off. So if you have two nodes connected, I'll try to zoom in here, and you want to get rid of this line connecting them, you just want to go over here and drag it off of that, if that makes sense. So now none of these have lines connected to them. Okay, and we have this black box right here, but it's actually gonna, we're gonna actually make use of that later on. Okay, so what we want to do is add a few nodes here. I haven't really thought about what nodes I'm going to add, but let's just say a really typical one would be RGB curves. So that's colors and also black and white. Yeah. So we want to add that, and it immediately hooks it up to the viewer node right here. But we can just pull this apart if we don't want to connect them right now. And we can add another node, so Shift A, and then we can also add a, let's add a filter. So we can add a filter and then filter, right here, the first one. And again, it connects it to the viewer, but we actually can keep this time, and we might want to space these out just a little bit. And if you're working with nodes for the first time, it's a little bit weird and confusing, but they are useful tools once you figure out how to use them. So what we want to do first is connect the render layer, this is the main scene, up to the RGB curves. So we want to click in this little yellow circle right here, and that will kind of extrude this little line that we can drag around, and we can hook it up to any of these other switches, or whatever you want to call them, these little balls. And you can connect it to anything really, the factor. Really, there's endless possibilities for nodes. There's just so many options. But what we want to connect it to now is the image, and that's the main one that you want to connect it to. So the image will continue on, and so pretty much what this is the render layers connecting up to this RGB curves node where we can change colors and black and white images. Then it will go on to the filter, so we want to have some kind of filter. We can sharpen it, we can soften it, the image, and then we'll go on to a viewer, which we will be able to view here, and then finally the composition. So that's the final result. Okay, so enough about this. We can just connect these all up. So we can go from the image, drag this onto this image right here. And now immediately, once we have those all connected, you can see in the backdrop we have our final image. And it's really nice to see the final image right there. That's why I always use the viewer node, so we can always see what's happening. And I know there is a little bit of a preview right here, but it's way too small to see. So that's what you want to do now, is hook this up to the composite node. Okay, so that's looking fairly nice, but also you can see in the backdrop that it looks a little bit blurred. And that's because it's going through the softened filter with a factor of 1. So now you can just play around with these nodes. You might want the scene to be a little bit darker, so you can drag down this line. You can also make new segments on this line. It's kind of like working with curves. Well, it is working with curves. And the curves kind of determine how much factor the colors are or the light is, and that's kind of what it's like, especially for the curves one. So I only need one curve, and I'm going to just make it a little bit darker. So to make it lighter, you would drag above the center point and darker for, or below for darker. So I just want to make it a little bit darker for some reason. The next thing I want to do is change the soften, because I don't really like it softened. I might want to change it to any one of these options. So sharpen would sharpen it up. It gives it a nice sharp edge, or maybe not too nice, a little bit harsh there. Lapis, which Laplace, however you pronounce that, would kind of give it some edge detection and kind of some weird effects. Same with all of these, kind of. Sobel, more edge detecting. Shadow is kind of like it gives it an out dent, kind of shadowy, kind of weird effect. But anyways, that's the filters. So let's just try Sobel. And I know it looks kind of weird right now, but you can change the factor. So we don't really want it at 1. We might want to put it down to 2 or 3. 3 looks okay. So now you can see that it has a nice sharp edge, and I actually like to use this for some of my models just because it gives it a nice effect actually, and sometimes it's a bit overkill if you go a little bit higher than that, because I mean it gets kind of weird. But I mean, if you like the look of that, then by all means just go with that. So I'm going to keep about 300. And right now, since we have it connected to the composite node, when we render it, it will be composited in that style. One thing before that you actually have to check to actually render it in that compositing style is you have to go to the rendering options, so the rendering tab, and you want to go down to post-processing right here. And I think in Blender 2.5 it's already checked, but just to make sure, this compositing option right here, you have to make sure that's checked in order to so it renders composited. And the sequencer, you don't really have to have that on. That's just for the sequence editor. But make sure this compositing box is checked, and you're pretty much good to go. When you render this, let's just render it now. So F12. It will first start with the basic image and then do the compositing after, and it looks, I'm happy to say, it looks pretty decent for a basic Pokeball. Now, I know this tutorial was pretty simple, but I mean, it showed you some basic things on lighting, modeling, and even some compositing, so I hope you got something out of this. Thanks for watching.